Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual book launch of When Secrets Become Stories, Women Speak Out. My name is Jennifer Malik. I'm the editor of the reading list, and we're hosting this event tonight along with Jonathan Ball Publishers. This evening, Lorraine Sithole will be in conversation with Sue Nyathi, the editor of When Secrets Become Stories, and contributors Melody Zondo, Desiree-Anne Martin, and Cathy Park-Kelly. Gender-based violence feeds on shame and silence, but in this extraordinary book, brave women reclaim their power and summon the courage in others to do the same. In speaking out, sharing what was once secret, a shame's hold is broken. As Sue writes, I am not defined by the abuse I have suffered. I am not a victim, I am a survivor. The book is available now in all good bookshops and online, so if you haven't got yourself a copy yet, you can buy one as we're talking. Such are the joys of online shopping. Or you can go out first thing tomorrow and get yourself a copy. We really recommend you do. It's a really, really powerful collection of stories. And it's suitable for men and women, because I think there's a lot of women who would really benefit from the book, but a lot of men, I think, as well. Please leave your questions about the book or about the discussion or your comments in the comment section wherever you're watching this video on Facebook or YouTube. We'll have time to answer your questions during a Q&A at the end of the session, and we will flash the relevant comments up that aren't questions during the talk, so you can take part in the conversation to an extent. Without further ado, let me hand over to Lorraine to take over the conversation and enjoy the launch.
Thank you so much, Jen. Good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching from. I am super excited to be speaking to the three contributors, as well as the editor and compiler of this book, Sue Nyathi. Now, Sue, I'm just going to dive in and start with you as okay. You know, the person who got 27 women together to open up and speak about their experiences. And as Jen has already alluded, that gender-based violence thrives on shame. And I was speaking to a friend earlier on, and that is exactly what she highlighted in a very brief conversation, that, oh my God, friend, shame. Shame is the thing that fuels the secrecy. Now, let's start off with your experiences, and then you can just lead us into what motivated you to get these brave women together to open up and share about their experiences.
Thank you, Lorraine, and good evening to everyone. So I think, like you say, I also struggled with the shame that comes with being sexually abused. And I think a lot of, you know, when you are sexually abused, because you never get an apology or accountability from a person who abused you, you then internalize the shame, right? And it can have, you know, diverse consequences in your life. And for me, because it happened at a young age, I wasn't really aware of what was happening at that time. And when, you know, the perpetrator asked me not to, you know, to keep it a secret, I complied. And it was only later, when I was in my teens, when I was, you know, reading a novel, actually, where I read about, you know, sexual abuse, and then it triggered the memory, and I realized, you know, that's exactly what had happened to me. And that's when I felt the shame. I was like, you know, how could I have done this? You see, I took on the blame and I took on the responsibility. I felt like it was my fault that it happened, and why, you know, I was complicit in keeping the secret. And so this is what shame does, you know. You feel dirty. You feel like, you know, a certain aspect of you isn't right. And so I decided, well, you know what? It happened to that little girl. It didn't happen to me. So it's like, I'm going to divorce it from me, and life will go on. And life did go on. But, you know, like everything, you know, that you sort of try and shove to the back of your mind plays out in the shadows of your life without you even knowing it. It's actually happening. And I think it was much later as well than when I read Rami Twene's memoir, where she speaks about being molested as a child. And I was shocked and amazed that, she actually had the courage to write about it in a book. And so I had her number and I texted her and I said, you know what, this actually happened to me as well. And I think through those, that she inspired me, sort of to acknowledge what happened and, and not to feel, ashamed. It wasn't my fault. And so that gave me courage. And I started to think, can you imagine how many other people, if they could read and feel the same way that I did, how many women that could actually help, and empower, to speak out, because that's exactly what happened. And then I started to speak out about it. And along came the Me Too movements. And I just felt like, okay, so many of us, I'm not an anomaly after all. This is actually more prevalent than we think it is. It's just we don't talk about it. And so I thought, okay, maybe I could do something. And, I use what I have at my resource, and that's writing and the power of words. And so I decided to, put this book together, and I pitched it to Jonathan Ball. And then so began, the idea of recruiting women who could contribute their stories. And I think, with this kind of book, it's not, you can't really say you can limit it to writers, because it's not every writer who has a story of abuse. Similarly, it's not every woman who's been abused who can write. So, I just opened it up to anyone who had a story. And those who couldn't write the story, they narrated it to me either through voice notes or Zoom, and I wrote the story for them. So I think what was important was just getting the story out there. That was my goal.
Wow, Sue, you are so right. In telling our stories, we fortify others into opening up. Now, Desiree-Anne, I'm going to come to you because, Sue just mentioned we don't talk about it ever. And it was your powerful and very profound debut memoir that came out 3 years ago. And it also contributed to the to the themes around the conversations that we are having today. Sue just mentioned that her experiences started as a young girl, and she lacked the knowledge. Obviously, when you are that age, you don't have the knowledge, and also the power dynamics between yourself and the perpetrator. You write about Dorothy, and you start her story at 4 years old, and it broke my heart. And it wasn't really such a unique story, because stories of abuse happen in our places of safety by people who should be protecting us. Now, speak to us about your motivation behind Dorothy's story, and what propelled Dorothy to just keep on going.
It's Cecilia, but we can call her Dorothy. It's fine. When I did write my memoir, I was very, very open about all of the abuse I experienced, and not just sexual abuse, but physical abuse and psychological abuse, and I kind of made reference to my earliest childhood sexual abuse, because honestly, at the time of writing my memoir, I didn't have a full recollection of it. I just had, and like with Sue, I was unaware of whatever I had been experiencing my life up until my late 20s was actually abuse. Because of my formative experiences, I was like Velcro. I just went around like collecting sticky, abusive relationships and experiences and thinking, well, this is how it goes. I'm supposed to be at the receiving end of all of this pain. And as I write in the story, that I equated love to pain, that love has to hurt. And I had what I call a healing crisis about 2 years ago, where it was this insane experience where I had a very vivid flashback and recalled every single detail of that incident of myself as a 4-year-old. Was not my best night. I was like sobbing for 5 hours. I was like phoning people saying, tell me it's not my fault. Tell me it's not my fault. Because I was just so, but with that healing crisis came this understanding that that had formed the foundation of how every other relationship that I attracted into my life played out. That I had to be the good girl, and that love is hurt, and even if it hurts, you got to try harder, and you got to love more, and most importantly, you don't talk about it, because I was also kind of like told, you're such a good girl. Don't tell your mommy and daddy, and even in my recollection of it, I was as I write in the story, I remember lying there going, well, maybe this is love, because I'd been experiencing domestic violence in my home at that time as well. And so I just equated all this violence and hurt and anger and pain. And that was my template, my blueprint for love. And I remember after that experience I had that one night, I wrote what was the draft of the story. And I don't know when it happened. And then I filed it away. And then Sue contacted me, or somehow, I don't know how. I don't know. It was one of those things where you don't have to remember how it happened. It's just important that it did. And I was like, I have the story. It's already written. And I swear to you, I did not edit it. I did nothing. I just went attach, send. And I was like, okay, it is out there. And it was, as compelled as I was to speak my truth in my memoir, I felt the same way. And I was so passionate and crazy in love with Sue for this concept of bringing an entire book of hope. And I did read a review recently where someone had said the only thing that's missing is the hope. And I was like, the fact that everyone's written the stories is the hope. That's the hope. They don't all have happy endings, but the fact that the book exists, that's a beacon of hope, I believe. And that was why I feel so privileged to be a part of this, and why I can continue to say, yeah, I do talk about it always.
Thank you so much. I mean, you mentioned that you learned that love has to hurt, and Melody, in your account, you recall a period where you spent a significant amount of your time and years with a man who was just hurting you, but because you had learned from home to Bekezela all the time, you felt that you had to keep on going back. Could you share a little bit of that experience for us?
Okay, so in my case, what happened is, I think going through what I went through with my parents first, that's where it started, because I first saw it happen to my mother. And it was happening not just in front of me, but it was happening in front of all our family members. And nobody was doing anything, nobody was saying anything. And it was so bad that it came to a point where she had to go to hospital a couple of times, because she was so badly hurt. And to me, I knew it was wrong. And I made a promise to myself that I would never put myself through that. And so when I found myself, in a relationship with somebody that was abusive, and I went through all types of abuse that you can think of, I couldn't understand why then that I accepted that and I stayed for so long. But I know now that the fact that, both my parents were not in my life, they were absent. I yearned for that love. I yearned for that validation. I just wanted to belong. I wanted a sense of belonging. So whenever I met somebody who would show me even a little bit of affection, a little bit of attention, I fell for it. And so because I wanted it so badly, I did not see the red signs. I just, I kind of labeled it as something else and missed that. And I just went with the flow, and I thought, nobody's perfect. This man does love me. I mean, he does have a good side to him. In the meantime, I mean, at every chance that he got, whenever we had an argument, I would get a beating, and it became part of our everyday relationship, until a point when I thought, you know what, we have a child now, and he had bought a gun, and so I knew that it was time for me to leave. But for the longest time, I accepted it. I thought it's okay. We taught, especially in the African home, that for you to be deemed a good wife, a good girlfriend, you have to put up with so much that sometimes it means losing your life. And so for me, I accepted it because that's how we are taught at home, that it's okay. It's fine for you to go through the abuse. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It's okay for him to cheat on you. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you. He's just a man, and men, they make mistakes. And so, yes, I found myself in that situation. But yeah, thank God I was able to get out of the relationship in one piece. And, I'm alive to tell the story today. So I'm just grateful for that.
Phew, Melody, I just got goosebumps. I mean, I read this collection from cover to cover as soon as I got it, and I keep on going back to the stories because with each read, I come away with a new level of understanding. Now, Cathy, you in your story, what struck me the most was how Carl always left. And when putting these stories together, there is always that thing. The men always leave after an altercation, after a beating, and they just leave you there, and you can't physically leave because firstly you are hurt, secondly you are psychologically damaged, you are ashamed, you can't go outside, people can't see me like this. And that is the part that really got to me, that more than not being able to leave because you feel trapped, it's also because physically you can't leave. You don't want people to see you like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me it wasn't that he was always the one to leave. I think often I was the one who managed to kind of escape through the front door, and I would go and sleep in my car in the garage downstairs. We lived in a townhouse complex, but it was always at night, so it was a matter of hiding myself and sort of going in the darkness to the car and sleeping on the back seat, or driving out and sleeping at an NGen 24-hour petrol station. But yes, so whether he left or I left, it was always about not wanting anyone to see it and trying to hide myself. And so if I saw a neighbor, like in the morning when I would come back up from having slept in the car, I would just make as if I'd fetched something in the car and I was just coming back at 6:30 in the morning, try and cover it up and be all cheerful. Yeah.
And that's the prominent theme in the book, covering things up, It's always about covering up for the other person.
And yes, I think for
and
me,
yourself.
Shame, shame goes hand in hand with self-blame. And so, and almost, I've been obviously writing a lot about this and thinking a lot about it. And I think an element of self-blame, there's also an element of strength there, because you're thinking, if I blame myself completely for his actions, then I can do something about it. I can change myself. I can journal myself to death. I can read self-help books. I can change. And that won't bring out the violence in him. So there's an element of trying to get control over the situation and blaming yourself so that you can actually do something about it.
Yes,
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Mel, speak. Yes.
No, I was saying I can relate to that because my situation was actually very similar to Cathy, where I blamed myself for the longest time. I thought maybe if I spoke less, maybe if I, dressed a certain way, then he wouldn't get violent with me. And so I tried to do everything exactly how he wanted me to do it. And so I would find other ways, like, but why is he getting violent when I didn't answer back? My tone is how he wants it, so I did all of those things where I was trying so hard to be the person that he wanted me to be, because I didn't want him to get violent, but he still would get violent anyway.
Yeah. True. I remember when I first got married. Well, I only got married once, when I got married, yes. one of the gifts that I received was a copy of Fascinating Womanhood. And it was my first experience with that book. And then I think by page 15, I was ready to burn it down. Because it was all about the man, keeping him happy, keeping the children quiet, keeping the house clean, making sure that you look presentable. Everything was for him. And I was like, what's for me? What is for me? And throughout this collection, and especially your stories, it's all about making him happy, ensuring that you don't press his trigger buttons. I mean, we never know what triggers them. Every little thing triggers them. Nothing triggers them, but they are always triggered. Now, Sue, you said you were inspired by Rami's story to come out and share your experiences. I mean, one thing that I know for sure, especially around gender-based violence and our experiences, the reason we don't want to share in public, the reason we only talk in our little corners, is because of the shame. What will people say? How will my colleagues look at me? What will my family say? Especially the family, because the first point of judgment is coming from them. I mean, what conversations were you having with yourself when you made that first public appearance talking about your experience?
You know what? I'd reached a point where I'd stopped caring about what other people would say, because it's no longer about them, It's about me, And I think that also came with age, not caring what anyone would say. I don't think I would have done that maybe 10 years ago, But I think now, because I'm older and I'm at that stage where I don't really care, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm more about my truth, because at the end of the day, it's my life. And inadvertently, what happened to me has shaped me in adverse ways. Like, if this hadn't happened to me, because you start to realize that you are the way you are because of things that happened to you, the trauma. I mean, I love men I had no business loving, I had no business being in relationships with, But because, subconsciously your trauma, you still seek that approval. You want to please. And so many things were detrimental, And it's only because I've come to a self-awareness and a realization that I now, understand, why this is like this and why I attract certain people into my life. And so, but if I was still bothered by what people thought, I would never have come full circle. And I believe I have now, And so for me, it's got nothing to do with what other people think. I don't care what they think. It's about me and, finding my truth and speaking my truth.
Amen to that.
If I can just add to that I learned when I came into addiction recovery, I was taught that guilt tells me that I made a mistake, and shame tells me that I am a mistake. And to have realized the difference between that, and that all the things that happened to me, and all the things that there were times when I was fully responsible, but the fact that the seed was planted that in the beginning, that if I spoke up, I would be the problem. I would be causing problems in the family. Like if I was to have spoken out about my perpetrator, even though I don't even think I would have had the words at that age, but that I would be causing the chaos and drama, as opposed to that what happened to me was the problem. And I carried that narrative throughout my entire life. When bad things happened to me, I was the problem. And even while I was in recovery, and I ended up in and this is my first marriage. I've had two, second time, Tom. In my first marriage, I even though I struggled so hard not to recreate these patterns in my life, I found myself with a narcissistic, abusive man. And to what Melody was saying, it was like, and to Cathy, what Cathy was saying is like, I try to like affirmation my way out of that, you know. It's like I've got nothing against affirmations. I'm just saying like I was like willing to do anything, but in that situation it was highlighted that I was the problem. You know, it kept being informed. So the narrative that I had about myself, the relationship I was in, he just like kept feeding that, going, yeah, you're the problem, you're crazy, you're mad, you have mental health issues, you're not you're too opinionated. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then like hand on heart, I will be love and acceptance and forgiveness or whatever it is. And I was just like, and thinking when Cathy mentioned that, I was like, what? No. But I know that now because I'm also kind of in the space where Sue is, where like, well, especially since my memoir, I don't zero are given because it's about my truth, and my shame has died on exposure of my truth. You know, and as everybody's does, which is the hope that, you know, there is that saying that secrets keep you sick and shame dies on exposure, and that's what I need to do for me. And if that resonates with one other woman, man, however you identify, then job done.
Yeah. Now, Cathy, I want to come to your story. I mean, you open your story with, I punched a boy once, and then towards the middle, right in the middle of the page, you go, I was brave once. And you know, when I was a young girl growing up in Soweto, I always thought that, you know, if only my father had a job, if only my father was educated, if only my father, you know, I don't know, hobbied or did something worthwhile with his life, then he wouldn't be this angry, you know. And this is the person, this is exactly the person that you write about. Carl. I mean, Carl was an educated man. He was a professional. He was a psychologist. And ish.
They don't come with a label, unfortunately. We like to stereotype.
Wouldn't that be easier? Oh my gosh.
You know, even the well-dressed, the ones with impeccable manners, you know, and I think, you know, that's the fallacy of abuse. You know, nobody comes packaged, you know. You know.
Yeah, tell us about Carl. I mean, he sounds like a psycho, you know, a very strategic, narcissistic piece of work. I mean, he had the language, he had the medical terms.
Yeah, I think and for so long I was in that intimate partner relationship with him for 8 years, and for so long I didn't want to use any labels like perpetrator and victim, and I didn't even use abuse. But it's only now, looking back and having worked on my story for several years, that I realize that labels like narcissist, and that can be very apt, and that it's been quite helpful in me kind of seeing where he was coming from in those times. But strangely enough, the thing that helped me to change, the thing that helped me not to change, the thing that helped me to get out of that horrible cycle of trying harder and harder and journaling myself to death and changing the way I talked, the way I dressed, the way I ate, the way I swallowed. The thing that helped me the most was stopping, just backing off, trying to understand, and just looking inward at myself and realizing that it was about my life and that I had precious days left, and that I would never understand him. I would never understand his behavior, his anger. I let go of trying to understand any of that. And that was when I was able to start crawling out of that darkness. And I think when we try and understand men and people who hurt us in our lives, it's not a good, it leads us into a dark hole, and it doesn't help us to come out for ourselves. You have to stop trying to understand and just face inwards to yourself. Yeah.
I love that, and we are getting so much love from the viewers. We see you, Tandazo, Senzeni, hi, Betty as well, Caroline Green, Aisha as well has 2 messages, and also I saw 1 or 2 messages from Facebook. And Cathy, you are so right. We spend so much time, we're taking precious years from things that we could be doing for ourselves, trying to understand these people, trying to become who they think we should be. And that takes us away from time that we could be spending doing amazing things, studying, hobbying, I don't know, just doing things that make our souls happy. Now, ladies, I'm going to ask you to read a paragraph or 2 from your stories, because I mean, this is such an important book to have. We want, by the end of this conversation, everyone who is out here to get a copy, and get a copy for their colleagues and their families, and sisters and brothers and friends as well. So Sue, we'll start with you and then move on to Desiree, Melody, and then end with Cathy.
Okay. It was then that I found my voice and spoke out. It starts with recognizing the shame for what it is and realizing that you are not it. By uncovering the shame and exposing it to the world, you break the power it has over you. Only exposed wounds can heal. The hidden ones fester and cause you to rot inside. Anyone who has ever been abused wears a black cloak of shame, heavy and burdensome and difficult to shake off. However, once discarded, it brings such liberation. I am not defined by the abuse I have suffered. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. The abuse has become something that happened to me, and it has stopped being an intrinsic part of me, as shame would have me believe. Once you acknowledge it, you own it, and that is incredibly empowering. And this is what this book is about: owning your story and telling it boldly without shame. When secrets become stories, women speak out.
I haven't told you this, Sue, but it's such an amazing introduction that you wrote. It's
Thank you.
brilliant.
Over to you.
Desiree?
Can I say penis? Because that's what I'm reading, so I'm going to say it. Cecilia stopped brushing the doll's hair and sat motionless. She felt a tap on her shoulder. Her body instinctively pulled away from his hand. He tapped her shoulder again, more insistently, slightly harder this time. She turned her body slowly, like she was swimming in syrup. Her eyes met his outstretched hand. He beckoned for her to get up and take his hand, simply gesturing with his middle and index fingers. Come, they said. Cecilia wanted to scream. She wanted to run through the kitchen and out of the back door. But she didn't. Cecilia was a good girl. She placed her small hand in his, allowed him to pull her up from where she had been sitting, and followed him to her parents' bedroom. She stopped at the doorway and surveyed their surroundings. Although no one else had been there the entire afternoon, and her parents would only arrive home at their usual time of 6:30 p.m. He ushered her into the room. Cecilia took 2 steps in. He followed her, closed the door, and turned the key, locking them inside the room. She had never seen a grown man's penis before. It looked like an ugly, misshapen sausage with one eye, alien and deformed. And she had never had anyone other than her mother and father touch her down there, but that was only during bath time. She'd seen her older brother's Willie, but he was 6 years old, so that didn't really count, she had decided. This was very, very different and felt very, very wrong, although she had been assured a few times in a hushed, desperate tone that it was okay, as long as you don't tell your mommy and daddy. You're such a good girl, Cece.
Sure.
Mel?
Okay. When the argument escalated, I started walking away from him. He yanked me by my hair with all his might, and I lost my footing and fell to the floor. I screamed, hoping his mom and one sister who were at home would come to my rescue. He quickly realized the neighbors could hear me and dragged me to the bedroom. I was fighting him, trying to break free from his tight grasp. I even threatened to open a case of abuse, but then he overpowered me, removed my SIM card from my phone, and told me to calm down. He locked me in the bedroom and commanded me to gather my thoughts since I was talking stupid. I felt utterly powerless and alone. Although his family could hear what was happening, they did nothing. It occurred to me that he could have killed me and they still would have protected him.
Cathy?
It is here in this safe space that the fog in my mind clears. I begin to see that it was never about me. Day by day, the new growth strengthens and stretches. Day by day, I let go of the heavy burden of self-blame I've been carrying. And I give up trying to understand Carl. I stop working to make sense of the impossibility of our togetherness. This new space of mine has a sturdy wooden door and a security gate that I can lock. The metal clang of this boundary line strengthens me. I do not open the gate when he comes knocking at all hours of the night. I stop answering the phone when he calls, again and again and again, the ring tearing me from sleep. Eventually, I unplug the phone. I immerse myself in hot, lavender-scented baths. I sleep, I cry. I do as Mary Oliver advises. I let the soft animal of my body love what it loves. And one night, I write the words that will lead me through the dark back to myself. I will never again, no more. I am brave now.
Shoo, I feel like I need a couple of minutes to just debrief. Thank you so much, ladies, for reading, especially from those pieces. And I could feel the emotion, I could feel the pain, and I could feel the courage as well as your bravery. Again, a lot of fantastic messages coming from the viewers. They are loving this conversation because it is heartfelt. It is something that is spoken from the heart. And I hear Luyanda says the stories are so different yet so similar. My heart is heavy. Anyone would like to weigh in on that? I mean, stories of abuse are not unique, always similar, but we have to have the courage to own them up and come out and speak, because once we own our part in that abuse, then we are on a better road to healing. Sue, you compiled this. Would you like to weigh in on the similarities of the stories?
Yeah, and I think what's important to note, and that was deliberate on my part, is the racial demographics of the book. Was purposeful in making sure I got representation from across all racial groups, just to show that abuse does not discriminate. It can happen to any woman, and income demographics across urban and rural, it happens. And it's just to show that every woman is vulnerable to it, whether it's in the home, in the workplace. It's just the same common thread that binds all these stories together. It's that same narrative, hence the commonality.
Sorry. And I think also, as you mentioned in the introduction, that it took you reading someone else's book to realize that what had happened to you was abuse. And I think what's amazing about this book is that it does cover such a wide, not just the demographic, but also just the kind of variety. It sounds like a buffet, but you know what I mean, of abuse, so that more people can identify that actually it's not just the the traditional male perpetrator, female victim kind of, and it's psychological and it's emotional and it's, all of that kind of thing. And that's what I love about all of these stories, is that it kind of opens that up and saying that it's not just this, this traditional concept that we hold in mind, that it comes in this form and this happens to real people. So if you're experiencing a 10-to-1 shot, it's happening to you.
Now, ladies, let's talk about bravery, because, we don't have to be fearless in order to be courageous. And we have seen throughout this collection of stories that although we were sitting in fearful spaces from fearful people, from people that we feared, there was always a spark of wanting to get out. And I mean, Melody, you had an exit plan. You leave this man under certain pretenses, and then you are gone forever. And that is the type of bravery and courage that we just need to keep on manifesting wherever we are in these type of situations. Now, Cathy, I'm going to start with you, because I mean, your essay captures beautifully the bravery and the courage that we need to keep on hoping and thinking that we are bigger than where we are at the moment.
Okay. And I think bravery happens in small little incremental motions and actions. And I think, I love watching those Superwoman and Wonder Woman movies, and they're my heroes. But ordinary life is very rarely like that. You very rarely go into a battle with armor. It's more about making tea in the kitchen and toasting some bread. And it's in those small actions that we can be brave. And so just for me, the way abuse happened in incremental moments down towards the darkness, just as much as that, I was able to pull myself up and out incrementally. So for me, bravery is about small steps. So anyone who's listening, it's about writing in your journal, finding the words for the first time about what it feels like or what's going on for you. That's an act of bravery. Listening to a little Facebook thing like this is an act of bravery. So yeah, we don't have to be superwoman. We just small little steps every day.
Desiree, would you like to weigh in on bravery and courage?
I'll just tell you about my experience of getting my author copy of the book. And I mean, I'd written it and gone through, thank you, Annie, like 5 different versions of editing, and I thought I knew the story inside out. And when I got my author copy and I read my own story in print, I got scared. I was like, oh, okay, no, like everybody will know now. It's not just Sue and Annie and me now anymore. It's like out there. I was like, oh, I did that. And like you don't have to, like you said, Lorraine, you don't have to be fearless to be brave. And bravery isn't these quantum leaps. And I agree with Cathy. It's about just getting out of bed and piecing the thing back together again, one slice of toast and one cup of tea at a time. And I also believe, though, that just because I'm such an advocate for people just owning and speaking their truth, is that asking for help, I believe, is the bravest thing that someone can do. And people have often seen that and stigmatized asking for help as a sign of weakness for whatever the issue is, whether it is abuse or it is mental health issues or it is, addiction or whatever it is. But that takes for me is the biggest inhale and exhale ever, is just to hold your breath and just put your story out there and just hope that it's, however it's received, but just to, whether it's writing it or speaking it and asking for the help. And the help isn't necessarily professional help. It's just like, just hear me. Just hear me, listen to my words, listen to my story, You don't have to fix it, but I need to tell you my story. And to me, that's also help, and that is incredibly brave.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, when I initially started, I mean, the contributors also changed, because I had contributors in the beginning who were willing to tell the story, right? They wrote it, and they got to, after writing it, like, some of them felt, no, maybe I'm not ready yet. Okay, so this is why I'm saying bravery. For all these women to have reached this point, it did take a lot of courage, because we had other contributors who then shared the story with their members of the family, and who said, no, you know what, you can't put this out there. So there's so many elements, in terms of that many had to overcome just to get, just to put it out there. So that's why I really, it takes courage, really it does, because I know that the different obstacles that people have to overcome, not just mentally, but the external ones too. People saying, the judgment even before the story is published. So there's so many layers to this, and as you know, some contributors remain anonymous because of that, the perceived judgment. So there's always that fear that still lingers as well when you're trying to tell your story.
I think I agree with you, Sue, because in my case, first of all, it took me a long time before I actually made the final decision that I was going to leave. And then it took more time for me to actually leave. But it also took me 20 years before I actually told my story. 20 years. Because for one, we have a child together. So I had to consider all of that, and I couldn't just come out and tell my story. I needed to think about our child, how it would affect her, how she would see him as a father. And they already have, a challenging relationship. So I had to consider all of those things before I took the step to talk. And I was actually okay taking this secret to the grave. But there came a time when I was ready to talk, and our daughter actually had approached me to ask me if there was any type of abuse in the relationship because of something she had heard from her aunt, who is his younger sister. And so to me, I kind of, that was like a sign to me, to say, this is the time now to speak. It's okay to speak now. But I was also at a point in my life where there was a shift. There was a certain shift in my life where I wanted to do things differently. I was headed towards a different direction. And so it came at the right time. But it took 20 years at the end of the day. It didn't happen overnight. And even until today, speaking about it, I'm still triggered. I still think about it. The trauma is still there. I still need to deal with it.
And this is why I want to weigh in now for everyone who may be listening. Don't ever ask someone, why didn't you speak out sooner? That's the worst thing you can ask, because people go through so many things before they eventually make that decision to speak out. Yeah.
I have one last question before I invite Jen in. We do have a couple of questions from the viewers, which is phenomenal because, these are stories that need to be heard. No more shame, no more hiding other people's secrets. Now let's speak about joy. You have written this, and as you guys have said, this is not the type of trauma that just happened yesterday. Melody has just said that it took her 20 years to arrive at this point. Let's talk about what brings you joy, ladies. What makes you happy? What gets you up in the mornings? Okay, Sue, I'll start with you.
My 5-year-old gets me up, but I think that there's a question there. It's about, and Moira, hi Moira, said, do you find people understand you better knowing your stories? And it's like, I'm in a very privileged position where I get to help people understand their own stories. And even in the writing of my story, in the writing of it, there was a whole lot, and that took me 40 years to eventually find my words. And it was, I did get a better understanding of myself, but in that understanding, that I'm hoping people get a better understanding of themselves. And that's kind of what gets me up in the morning, is that through sharing my truth in the work that I do, and just in being as authentic as I possibly can on any given day. But much like my hair, it's not the same 2 days in a row. It's like, it's that just like resonance, that truth has such immense resonance, and it's undeniable when when you hear someone's truth. And and that gives me joy in when helping people unveil their authentic truth and find their voice and speak that truth. And also, I have 2 daughters, and I have done all of this for me, but in doing this, I'm breaking these insanely painful patterns of my past so that I don't need to pass on this legacy to them. And that is a huge factor in me being as open as I am about the things that I've experienced in my life, is that this was like passed on to me without my permission, without my consent. This was my legacy. And I'm like, hell no, it's not going any generation further. And I see that in them. They have the freedom to express themselves. They have very strong opinions, especially the 5-year-old. And they can talk about anything, and there are no secrets here. That is our family crest. Like, we don't keep secrets, and that brings me joy, is that even if it was very painful, a lot of the things I experienced, but if I had to do that in order that my daughters can have the freedom just to feel safe and feel joy for themselves, then job done.
Okay, my turn. What gives? I think for me, what makes me wake up in the morning is, living a purposeful life, and I feel, right now that's, I found my purpose, and that really drives me every day. What gives me joy? My sunshine. Yeah, he gives me a lot of joy, and I think, there's just something about the love of a child and the innocence, and the purity, and you just see the world. When you see the world through their eyes, it just renews you in a way. And I really needed that, I think, in my life. So my son, definitely. But yeah, so it's just, for me, it's living my purpose, and like speaking my truth gives me joy, that that my words can help someone else out there. And spark of something. And when people tell me, what you've done has given me courage, to face my own demons, that makes me feel good, that somehow, some way I've helped someone, and yeah, that's enough. It gives me, makes me happy.
Yeah. Okay.
I think for me, it's definitely my family. I have probably one of the most supportive families anybody can ever ask for. Being on this journey that I've been, they've been holding my hand every step of the way, and just pushing me to do the best that I can. Especially my kids. I find a lot of joy in my kids. But also the work that I'm doing now. I mean, I was in corporate South Africa for over 20 years. I maneuvered different spaces in corporate South Africa. But what I do now gives me so much fulfillment that it's priceless. The feeling that I get, getting an email from somebody saying, I watched your story on TV, or I read your story on When Secrets Become Stories, or I listened to your interview on radio and you changed my life. There is nothing that compares to that. And to me, it's incredible. And I'm so grateful to have been a part of this project, because it has given me more than I asked for. To me, it was just me telling my story, but I'm getting so much more out of it. So thank you, Sue, and whoever that is involved in it. It's really, really, really such an incredible project.
Thank you too, Melody.
For me, what gets me out of bed in the morning is the cup of coffee that my husband brings every morning. And what brings me joy is the love of a good man. There are good men, there are good people out there, and the love of a good man can be incredibly powerful in helping you come back to yourself. And my son. So the two men in my life, my son and my husband, are just lovely.
And I think it's important to point out that, true love also heals,
Yeah.
Like, love can also heal, I think we always forget that.
Yeah.
It does.
But not in an empty way. I mean, you don't go and try and find true love because you feel empty inside and you're just looking for some salvation. You need to arrive with fullness.
Definitely.
It's lovely.
Yes, you need to arrive having loved yourself, guys. You got me a lot more emotional there.
Exactly.
Okay, it wasn't for me.
I've been trying to see if I can't find a piece of tissue. I can't. Ladies, thank you so much. I'm going to invite Jen in right now. I think we have addressed all the questions. We only had oh, okay. There is one more question that I didn't see from Sue Adams. Jen?
Yes. So Sue asks, and I've clicked on it, let's see if it'll appear. Sue asks, what helps you all to move on and not let this define you? Perhaps. Who wants to go first?
Cathy, want to go?
Yeah, for me, writing out the story for myself so that I could find my own truth and come back to who I was, and then please God through the writing, touching other people. That's what's helped me move on immensely.
So this was the perfect project for you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. My abuse has defined me in certain aspects. I think everything that all of my lives, like I have so many of them, my life's experiences have defined me, good or bad. But I don't identify with what has happened to me. I haven't let it form who I am intrinsically, but for everything that I had to endure, I had to counteract with some kind of defense mechanism, some kind of coping skill, self-defeating or positive, that did define me. It made me who I was, because that's how I had to navigate the world. I had to be strong, and I had to be good, and I had to be obedient. So to some extent, it did define me, but it is not my identity. It is not who I am, but it has shaped me. And I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. Don't go looking for abuse to be defining and shaping you. But I'm saying it's just that it has made me resilient, and it has made me empathetic, and it has made me passionate about like speaking my truth and getting other people to. And so as horrendous as they all were, it's part of the engine that does drive me. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So on my side, I would say
it does.
It's helped me
Melody,
to understand who I am and why I am the way I am. So and understanding that, it has helped me to move on. Because I understand myself better, and why I reacted in certain ways. Previously, I didn't know why. So in acknowledging what happened to me, I've been able to unpack certain issues that I've had. So that's how I'm now moving on forward, and because I have a greater understanding of who I am. It happened to me, but it's not. It doesn't. It's not what I am. I'm not going to be the girl who was abused. No, I'm Sue. That's who I am.
I think for
Melody?
me, ever since I was young, a young girl, I always knew that I was meant to do impactful work, work that would actually change people's lives. I just didn't know what work it would be until pretty much right about now, in the journey that I'm in. And I think the pain and the trauma that I've gone through, it's given me so much clarity. Now it's like the penny dropped and it's all making sense now. And so it has helped me to navigate my way into the next chapter of my life. And I'm so excited to see, what's in store.
Yeah.
That's great.
So beautiful.
Lorraine, do you have any closing thoughts?
Always. Thank you so much, Jen, for this opportunity. I just wanted to say a hearty thank you to the ladies for sharing their stories, as well as for Sue in seeing this project through, especially it having been put together in these hard times and change times that we find ourselves in. And I also want to thank you and the reading list for giving me the opportunity to be on the driving seat, and it was such an amazing and spiritual and soul defying moment for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
And everyone who's been listening, please go buy the book.
Yes.
And we didn't tell our stories in vain.
Yes, buy the book.
Out now from Jonathan Ball Publishers, and thanks to Jonathan Ball as well for helping us put this event together.
Thank you.
The book should be available wherever they sell books. You should be able to find this book. So if you can't, phone Jonathan Ball and let them know. Thanks so much, Lorraine, for coordinating the conversation and so delicately and thoughtfully. And thank you to Sue, Melody, Desiree-Anne, and Cathy for sharing your stories with such courage. And I really hope the book reaches the people that it's intended for. And I hope it will. And we're getting some final love the books comments, which is great to see.
Yay. Thank
you
Queen.
very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.